Welcome to Drifting Deeper. This is a podcast about consciousness, culture, and human potential. Coming to you from California, my name is Nick, and I'll be with you throughout the entire podcast today. And we're coming back from a long hiatus in which we desperately needed to deal with some other things in the other parts of our life, but we're damn glad to be back and making podcasts again. To make up for that long hiatus, I've got an extra special guest today, but we'll get to that in a moment. For now, I want you to think carefully about the big decisions in your life that you need to make that are really going to have a huge effect on your life. And one of those really big decisions is who you're going to fall in love with. And it really doesn't matter if you're gay or straight or bisexual, pansexual, or however you want to identify. The reality of it is the person or persons that you allow into your life in the context of a loved one, in romantic love, of course, those people are going to have a massive effect on your life, possibly for the entirety of your life. And if you're very lucky, you'll be able to spend the entirety of your life with that special person. And that's a huge decision, who you love. And I think it's very important to remember that it is, in fact, a decision, who you love. It might not be a decision you're consciously making, but it's definitely a decision. In the West, we tend to think of romantic love as some type of unstoppable force that simply pops on into your life and kind of makes things work out in particular ways. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works. Or maybe I should say fortunately, because it's good to have agency in those particular situations, isn't it? Now, who you're attracted to, you don't really have a whole lot of choice in that. That's an even more complex thing. But who you decide to spend the rest of your life with in love, or even the rest of your night with in love, well, that's something you've got a lot more say over, whether you know it or not. And today's special guest is Kayli Larkin. That's KayliLarkin.com. If you want to go check out her website, I'll put the link in the show notes on YouTube for you. And Kayli is a dating coach, and, well, I'll let her go ahead and describe what it is that she does. Very special services she provides in helping people really analyze and take a close look at their romantic attachment patterns and how they can really use those patterns for their best benefit. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring Kayli on here, and I hope you guys enjoy this interview. It was definitely one of the best interviews I've done so far, and I look forward to sharing it with you. Okay, Kayli, good to see you again. We originally met last month at HypnoThoughts through Elizabeth, and I was really blown away by the specialty that you practice in. And can you tell us a little bit more about what it is exactly you specialize in?
Yeah, sure. So how there's a lot of single, lonely people out there who they want to be in a relationship, but for whatever reason, they're awesome people, but they just keep attracting the wrong partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So I help them break that pattern so they can find an awesome partner and get the love and intimacy they really want.
Excellent. Okay. So when you find somebody in one of those patterns, and everybody knows at least one person, or has been that person at least one point in time in their life, what do you think it is that really sets a person off? Because I know I don't specialize in it at all, but I've definitely dealt with a lot of the whole my partner did this or that kind of thing. Because people for some reason they come to me, and I don't know if they do this for you, but they come to me to either forget something that their partner did, or, which I don't do, or find forgiveness within themselves for something their partner did. But ultimately, they're looking for an excuse to get into a partner. What is it you feel that sets people in the direction of that behavioral pattern?
So a lot of relationship problems stem from something called attachment style. And a lot of people haven't heard about attachment style, but when I first learned about it, it blew my mind because it explained all of the relational patterns that I'd had over my entire life and those of my friends. And it was so incredible to just find this one thing that explained everything. But what happened for me is I learned what it was, and then I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to shift. And so I began to learn tools, and I studied with one of the leading experts in somatic attachment therapy to actually learn how to shift attachment.
Somatic attachment. We're going to come back to that.
Yeah, let's come back to that. It's a little bit of a longer story, and I can tell you a little bit
Okay, cool.
more about how I come to this.
Okay. So attachment styles. Now, I've run across those studying psychology over at the local university that I probably shouldn't name. What can you tell me about attachment styles themselves? I assume you're talking about the avoidant or overly attached or...
Yeah, exactly. And it's awesome that you've even heard of these because so many people haven't, Nicholas. So that's great that when I first spoke to you, I was like, oh, this person actually knows what this is. That's great. So when I talk about attachment, I'm not talking about the Buddhist concept of letting go, that kind of attachment. I'm talking about the normal and healthy attachment bond that we have at a very young age to a primary caregiver, mom or dad typically. That term from psychology, like you said, brought to us by John Bowlby. So babies are completely dependent on bigger people to take care of them, right? To take care of all of their needs, very dependent. And need more than to be happy functioning adults. We actually need love and security. And so when a child gets that love and security and that consistent loving attention, not suffocating, but just that right amount of presence and responsiveness and playfulness and protection, that child learns that their needs will be met and will be taken care of. And so they learn at a very young age that if they cry out, that something good will happen. If they express a need, that something positive will come out of that. And this is the ideal situation, but it doesn't always happen. When it happens enough, that child develops what's called secure attachment. And if an adult has secure attachment, they expect good things out of relationships. We know from relationship researchers that adults with secure attachment tend to have very easy and high-functioning relationships. They're comfortable expressing and hearing needs. They're responsive. They're attuned to their partner. They're playful. They're fun. And also they naturally just have this ease and comfort with that separation and coming back together because they trust that their partner will come back. Yeah. And that's one of the things
that makes everyone kind of sick amongst their...
Right. That couple that just seems to have it together and it's very lovey-dovey and they don't have a lot of problems. Yeah. And secure people do have problems, but overall relationships tend to just be a lot easier.
Okay, very cool. So it follows the, I'm not going to say that's really Freudian because it's not. I see a bit more Jung in there as far as the developmental patterning goes for archetypal caregiver things. But there is this interesting line of correlation between even those casual things that an adult, a mother or a father will do that might affect their children, which we see in pretty much every issue that we deal in any type of therapy, where even those side comments can trigger a change in the attachment style. And it's always been really interesting to see that play out in the adults that we end up dealing with in, well, pretty much anywhere. So there's the securely attached. Was that the term, secure attachment?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And there's 3 other styles. So sometimes people just hear about anxious and avoidant. And the way that I learned it, we call it anxious, but we also call it ambivalent. So I'll use the terms anxious and ambivalent. I'll interchange those. And there's avoidance. And there's another type called disorganized that a lot of people haven't heard about, but it's very, very important and actually very common. Okay. Would it be helpful to explain a little more to our listeners about these different styles? Because chances are, if they're human, they've had some kind of relationship difficulty. And often these attachment styles just explain all of the things for people.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that is something that anyone would benefit from learning more about.
Awesome. Okay. So ambivalent or anxious attachment, I'm just going to call it ambivalent attachment. Sometimes people call it preoccupied. That starts way back, and all attachment starts very, very early childhood as babies or even back in the womb. And ambivalent attachment starts from an inconsistent, or unreliable connection. And so what happens is, if you imagine a baby, and let's just say a mom, but a parent, and the baby cries, and the mom comes over and just trying to figure out what's wrong with her baby. Is she hungry? Is she tired? Does she need something else? Does she need her diaper changed? If the mom is really attuned and good at figuring things out, that creates consistency. But if the mom sometimes gets it right, sometimes doesn't, that creates inconsistency. Or if the baby cries and mom comes right away every time, that creates consistency. If the baby cries and mom sometimes comes, but sometimes doesn't, it's kind of like you're hitting the slot machine of attachment. You might get left today, you might not.
Okay.
So that's that inconsistent, unreliable connection. And this creates doubt and anxiety that our needs will be met. And so we adapt by hanging on to the connection and wanting excessive reassurance and being like, it's been 5 minutes, why haven't you texted me back? And so sometimes you'll hear these people called clingy or needy, that maybe an avoidant partner, or these more derogatory terms could be used to describe this strong ambivalent style. And the reason why we call it ambivalent, because that word colloquially means, well, maybe yes, maybe no, is because ambivalence can have trouble recognizing or accepting love when it's present. So they're like, I want the love. But then when it's there, sometimes they have trouble even recognizing that it's there. And ambivalents can lose themselves in relationships. They can get stressed out when their partner leaves. Those transition times of, okay, my partner is going home or going on a trip, those can be really challenging, or waiting for the text message, because as ambivalents, we can get so preoccupied with how our relationships are doing that we can even have trouble focusing on other things in our life, like our work or career or whatever. It's a lot of preoccupation, a lot of focus on getting that need met.
Okay. I'm picturing a few women that I dated in my 20s right off the bat.
Yes.
So that's ambivalent. And then avoidant this was not at all my specialty in my undergrad at all. So I'm trying to dredge that up from my memory. The avoidant and the insecure are the two major dysfunctional ones. But you had mentioned disorganized.
So insecure covers 3. It covers ambivalent, avoidant, and disorganized. So the next one, you're right, is avoidant. And avoidant is an adaptation in response to a lack of connection. And that could be physical connection, it could be emotional connection. And so typically this is a parent who either isn't around that much, or doesn't touch that much, or focuses on tasks rather than that loving emotional connection. If you picture again the baby, maybe in the crib, crying, mom's not coming right away. It takes her a really long time. So the baby's like, okay, well, I'm not getting that safety and security from mom. I guess I have to take care of it myself. And they learn how to meet their own needs. They get hyper independent, not relying on other people, because they didn't have the trust that need would be met from the very beginning. They don't trust other people to be there for them when they need them. And so because it wasn't safe to be vulnerable, they end up trying to make themselves invulnerable. So we, as avoidants, we might learn to rely on ourselves or ignore our needs, but the underlying desire to connect is still buried underneath. So we might adapt by tuning out our needs, or playing video games, or there's all kind of withdrawal strategies that we might use to self-soothe. But underlying this, there is actually a lot of anxiety. It's just they're not as in touch with that anxiety as the ambivalent.
Okay. So sideline real quick, something just occurred to me. One thing that I deal with a lot here, being in a college town, is what some psychologists, not all, and it's a little controversial, but they like to call it the male crisis. You made me think about it when you mentioned video games. We have the trope of generations, my generation on down, of men having grown up without a father. And then, of course, the working mother is so busy being a working mother, oftentimes there's no emotional connection there. So we have huge generations of children on all sides, of course, but predominantly men is the trope that I run into, where they display those avoidant tendencies. Do you see a way to for anyone, male or female, who grew up without that security of having both parents around and having that need met, for them to, as an adult, change their attachment style?
Yes, so that's a great question. And fortunately, attachment style is something that can change because we are all wired for secure attachment. And sometimes people start out with secure attachment and then something happens, a trauma, or they get into a relationship with someone who's really insecure and they get pulled out of secure attachment. But we can get it back. And even if we didn't win the parental jackpot, so to speak, or our parents were away a lot, we can still become more secure. So yeah, and we can talk about that later. But a little bit more just to finish up the four attachment styles. So we did ambivalent. We talked a little bit about avoidant. And so the third insecure style is called disorganized. And the reason why it's called disorganized is because it's a combination of ambivalent and avoidant, and it has an additional fear component. And so this stems from when the attachment system and the survival system got cross-wired. And this can happen because the environment's dangerous. So for example, normally, we want to attach to our primary caregiver, and they're who we run to for safety. So when something scary out in the world happens, you see it on the playground, right? Mm-hmm. Something scary happens, the kid goes running to mom or dad to tell them about it and get some support. But if that caregiver is dangerous, and this can be physically violent, this can be emotionally unpredictable or chaotic, it's not safe to go to that attachment figure. And that obviously can be very confusing for a child and also for an adult. And so what happens is that creates a lot of anxiety, it creates a lot of confusion and fear. And as a result, we have trouble self-soothing and regulating our emotions. And so we might start to get close to someone and then experience that fear and withdraw again. And it can be challenging to maintain long-term relationships, because it takes a little bit more kind of constant connection. And so that's disorganized. And then, of course, there's the last one, which is secure attachment. And that's what we talked about before. It's the person's, comfortable, being playful and having connection, comfortable leaving again. And we trust that our needs will be taken care of. We're okay expressing our needs. And we're responsive and attuned to our partner, we're playful, all those kind of good things. So that's kind of what we want to aim for in all of this, is like, how can I get that? Because life is so much easier, so much easier.
There was a, somewhat tropish, but there was a television show that I found an analog for when I was looking into attachment styles that really showed the secure attachment. Mad About You, back in the early 2000s. Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt, I think. Mm-hmm. That was a really strong example of a healthy relationship, because you didn't really see a whole lot of discord between the two of them.
Right.
Yeah. And at that time, of course, I was super, I was in my 20s, so I was, in that young, aggressive male mindset, so it did not make sense. But it's good to have examples out there when we don't have an expert such as yourself, or qualified, that's not the word I'm looking for, capable parents who set up attachment style.
You're right. And actually, this is something that people can do at home to really help their attachment systems, because the media that we watch and put into our brains does affect our attachment system. And so, and you see a lot of Hollywood movies where, the person plays hard to get and the other person chases them. And a lot of times it's something called the anxious avoidant trap, where it's one person who's kind of avoiding, the other person's anxious and they're avoiding, there's a lot of chemistry between those two. Yeah. But even just watching movies where there's a lot of kind of relational violence, discord, is not good for our attachment system. And it is better for our attachment system to watch really close, loving connections. Mm-hmm. And so being careful about what we put in our brains does make a difference.
Yeah, that it does. I'm trying to remember the psychologist I had a long conversation with, and he wasn't talking about attachment styles per se, because the theory hadn't really reached mass proportion at that point, but he was breaking down why Twilight was so bad for everybody. And he had some very good points. Like, there's no physical description of Bella anywhere in the books. So it's just a blank slate for young ladies to project themselves onto. And then Edward,
Right.
of course, is just that avoidant bad boy who just positions her at arm's length the entire series of books.
Yeah.
Just,
I don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very good example of like bad, well, the whole vampire thing.
Right, exactly. And I don't remember the movie or show well enough to remember the attachment styles, but you're right that they're portrayed, insecure attachment styles are portrayed as the norm in Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely.
And that kind of love, the rom-com, the typical rom-com formula that we're used to is based around the anxious avoidant trap.
Yeah, yeah, they're so formulaic these days, and it is a strange cycle that society has found itself into where we produce these situations where people are tense and project out, and then, of course, they throw all that stuff in there, and people end up saying, "Oh, that's like me. I think I'll pay $20 to watch this movie," and it's just this weird reinforcement.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
geez. I'll take the Avengers movies any day of the week. There's not a lot of attachment styles in there.
Mhm.
Okay, so when an adult finds himself stuck with these attachment styles and reaches the place where they realize, at a minimum, hey, something's not right here, and I need to fix something, or I'm going to be miserable, or making this person miserable, how do they change their attachment style?
Yeah, great question. So like I said, the good news is even if we didn't win the parental jackpot, we all have this blueprint for secure attachment. So we're really just addressing the attachment adaptation that got in the way so we can return back to secure attachment. It's like coming home. So the first step is learning your attachment style and even learning what this is all about. And in fact, you can take a quiz to do this. In fact, I have a free gift for your listeners I can share later.
Okay.
So they can take this right on my website. And then I also have a free change plan that goes along with it, 10 steps towards secure attachment in an awesome relationship. So learning your attachment style is really the first step.
Mm-hmm.
And typically when people do that, they have this aha moment of, oh, this explains everything. And it's awesome and amazing. But what happens to a lot of people, and what happened to me when I first learned about it, is then I got stuck because I didn't know how to change it. And so the knowledge alone, it's not enough. And that was my struggle when I first learned about attachment. So the next step is evaluating your behaviors from an attachment lens. And then you'll start to see patterns, that you engage in, and you'll start to notice your friends' patterns and your coworkers' patterns and your romantic partners and all of your exes, that they all have an attachment style too. And it's really eye-opening. And in my plan, I have really specific action steps that you can take now to become more secure and happy in your relationships. So that by learning strategies for your particular style, you can learn to behave in more secure ways and attract more secure people into your life. And it's just a positive spiral upwards. Mm-hmm. So, but attachment is wired in on the level of the nervous system. So at one time, our ability to attach to a parent was required for survival.
Okay.
And that's why people can have such strong feelings come up in relationships. They're out of proportion to the situation. Have you ever someone who's something came up for them relationally and it just didn't make sense that they felt so strongly about it? Mm-hmm. That just tends to happen. And so for a baby who's alone and crying in their crib, though, it really is all about survival. And our bodies process it like it still is about survival.
Yeah.
Even when it's just a text message. So to kind of answer your question, it's important to address the kind of cognitive or behavioral aspect of attachment style, but it's also important to address attachment at the body level or the somatic level, at the level of the nervous system, because that's where it all started.
Yeah, definitely. I have a theory that I'm trying to flesh out. I'm not at my master's level yet, so I can't do any experimentation. But my theory is that since babies, the slightest thing that goes wrong is, that's it for the baby because they're just so fragile. But as we transition, of course, our survival goes from those basic, food, shelter stuff into a type of instinct that's more like survival of our DNA when people reach appropriate age for having children, passing that on. My suspicion is that we transition on some unconscious level from having those stressors of being, just pure survival to our romantic partners carry that stress because they're our option for passing on our genetic traits, if that makes sense. It's a little bit of evolutionary biology, but like it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm playing around with that thought there. I might have something fun to bamboozle one of my psych professors with.
That's exciting.
So, what got you really into the field of, well, helping people find better partners? I don't know if there's a specific name. I don't want to call you a dating coach, but more of an.
Well, I do.
Oh, okay.
It's funny because, yeah, I don't think I'm a typical dating coach at all. So I call myself a dating relationship coach
Okay.
because I do work with people who are single and sometimes in relationships, but I'm doing a lot more than just, I'm not matchmaking.
Yeah.
I do also do the stuff where I help people with online profiles and I help them date online and I help them figure out, what do I want in a partner? What don't I want? What's important to me? I help them with body language to recognize if someone's attracted to them. I help them feel more confident when they're on a date. I do all of that stuff too. But for me, the attachment work is very fundamental. And often if someone's having problems with those other things, they're also going to be having problems with attachment. So.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now, oh shoot, I had a really good question from something you just said, and then it just fell right out of my dome. So looking at today's challenges in the dating world, and I feel safe in saying with the large number of multiple generations now, no longer having that access to that secure dream of the forever relationship. So we have people from my generation and then the boomers before us, and then all the way down to the millennials and under. There's a ridiculously large dating pool out there. How do you feel the best way is for somebody to actually get out there and start properly representing themselves so that they're not, finding themselves drawn to the wrong people or drawing the wrong people in, since we have that weird mechanism where people will absolutely find the wrong person if they can?
Right. And that's such a great observation because a lot of the time that people are drawing in the wrong people, it's because they have unhealed things in themselves they're trying to unconsciously fix. And so this happens a lot with my clients. A lot of them have narcissistic abuse in their backgrounds where they dated toxic narcissists and really suffered because of it. I work with a lot of empaths and many of them have experienced that. So yeah, you're right. There is a thing about people being attracted to people who aren't good for them.
Yeah.
And so really before they even just dive straight into a dating website, I think it's really important to do some self-reflection, learn about their attachment style, and look at their relational patterns. Think back about their past relationships. Okay, who did I date? What worked? What went well? What didn't go well? Are there any trends? Are there any patterns? In these 3 relationships, I had the same problem. Well, I'm the common denominator, stuff like that. And then figuring out what do they actually want? And I have a process I help clients with where we go through how to really pick what's important to them in a partner. And yeah, eventually, when they do go around to getting on a dating website, there's certain dating websites that are better than others and are more likely to meet somebody that's what they're looking for. And there's ways to, tweak their profile. There's ways to write messages. There's ways to pick profile photos that will optimize their chances to meet someone who's really compatible. And I also learned kind of on my own, and I can tell you how I got into attachment if you like, but I learned on my own how to assess someone's attachment style on a certain dating website. So I'm pretty good often at figuring out which ones are not going to work for me. That was my history. But yes.
All right. Speaking of strange dating websites, when I was first, I briefly considered definitely not the pickup artistry field, but the whole like building dating confidence, probably a little similar to what you do, but certainly not in depth. And just as an experiment, I started creating fake profiles for free dating websites to experiment and to see what type of like reaction would come from particular things. And most of them were ignored because let's face it, I mean, that market is seriously biased towards half its population.
Correct.
But strangely, the most responses I got was a profile that I set up for a shark named Marty, which was very odd. I couldn't quite figure out what was interesting about a picture of a great white shark that was drawing people in.
So wait, let me get this straight, Nicholas. You actually had a shark dating profile.
I did.
I love it. Was that metaphorical in some way?
No, no. I had various ones out there set up with fake profiles, and mind you, this was in the sense of experimentation, not trolling. But yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's weirdly, I had a large number of ladies respond to that. I'm not entirely sure what that says about the attachments of those ladies, but
I'm not sure what that says about dating online in general, that people are responding more to a shark profile than a real human. But
yeah, it was weird. Apparently, there was some genuineness to Marty that people really liked.
well, that could be part of it, is it really hits people's dopamine receptors. We all want something a little different. And so that's something also when you're creating a website, is how to hit that dopamine, how to create something that catches people's attention, doesn't just look like every other thing they're reading, because that will, people will be swiping then if they just are bored.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Just like
yeah, that's really cool that you did that. I love that.
well, I mean, it gave me some good insights as far as like the similarities between weirdly dating and marketing. Like if you don't know how to, and it's reasonable to look at it that way. I mean, you have to have a good product that you're advertising. You have to advertise with your boundaries set, most certainly.
Yes.
And I'm going to segue off that smoothly in just a moment. And then, of course, you have to be able to deliver in such a way and know when to end an association when you need.
Right.
So, speaking of quality products,
Mm-hmm.
when people tend to get involved in relationships, we have that honeymoon period where those two people kind of have that weird several month to 2 year period. I think the estimate's about 40 months now in most psychological circles, where their personalities are pretty much about each other, and then they
Right.
start to diverge back into separate selves again. How do you, in your professional sense, how do you think it is people can maintain that sense of individuality and that important ability to build those borders for themselves within a relationship?
So I love this question because it's something that many of my clients struggle with. So like I mentioned before, I work a lot with empaths, and empaths do sometimes struggle with losing themselves in the other person. And that's also extremely common in ambivalent attachment, where we can lose ourselves in the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And because in ambivalent attachment, people are looking for reassurance from the outside. So we're looking for someone to soothe us. And so this is something that I do with people in my sessions. And sometimes it's easier to show than tell. Maybe if you like, we could do a little demonstration for our listeners of how
Yeah.
I might work with that. Would that be helpful to do a guided exercise around boundaries? Okay, great.
Yeah. So, how did you want to do this?
Okay, so why don't we just, and I'm going to kind of skip some of the hypnotic processes that would help someone get into a really deep, relaxed state, just for the purposes of the show.
We're the best, and of course, I'll just do the disclaimer. We're both hypnotists in this, so you shouldn't be listening to this while you're driving. Period. But if you are driving, stop listening now. Just pick this up at this point in time, somewhere where you can sit, relax, and focus on this.
Right. Okay, great. So, very nice. Yes. So if you're listening out there, go ahead and just find somewhere to sit, and just begin by taking a few deep breaths, and begin to get in touch with whatever physical sensations are there in your body. You can feel the surface you're resting on. You can feel your feet on the floor. And you can notice your breath. As you breathe in, notice how the shifting sensations in that belly change as you breathe out. And just relaxing into that physical awareness for a moment. Some people like to keep their eyes closed for this part of the exercise. It's just going to imagine that there's someone sitting across from you. It doesn't really matter who it is. Could be a partner, could be a child or a friend or a pet. And so just imagining this person is sitting across from you. Just notice their shoes. And that's all you need to notice right now, is just letting yourself take in their shoes. And as you're noticing this person in front of you, also notice what's happening in your awareness. Track what's occurring. As you're including so we started out with just you and your sensations, but now there's someone else right there, or more specifically their shoes. And so notice what happens. Notice if your attention jumps to the other person, or does it stay there? Do you lose that connection with yourself? Do you lose that connection with your breath? Do you lose that connection with your seat and your feet? And if you do, go ahead and just come on back to your own body. And you can do that by moving a little bit, or kind of wiggle around a little, wiggle your toes, feel your seat. And just notice those sensations you noticed when we first started doing this. And we get so much of the information from our body. So at any point in time, just getting lots and lots of information. Our body felt this awareness. And just taking a moment to reconnect to that you-ness of you, that essential core of who you are. Taking a few breaths. And now just imagine that person is sitting across from you, seeing their shoes. And once you feel better able to kind of connect to yourself and also notice that person in front of you, see if you can move your awareness so that it's also taking in their presence and their physicality. And just notice what happens as you do that. Do you lose the connection to yourself or your physical sensations? And if you do, just go ahead and shift your focus back to your body, back to your awareness, back to your breath. And just begin to work on that connection with yourself and the other person who's there, so that you can take in both of you being there at the same time. And at first it might be a little bit of an oscillation as you start with yourself and then shift over to them, taking a little more of them maybe. You can see the rest of their clothing or what they're wearing or how they're sitting. If it's comfortable, you can see their eyes and their gaze. Safe. And then coming back to yourself. And then noticing how you can let both of those things happen at the same time. So expanding your awareness really in a way that's encompassing and including both of you. So the entire relational field all right here, right now. And if anytime while you're doing this you feel disconnected to yourself, just reground again. So just feel your feet again on the floor. And the thing about ambivalent attachment that we have been talking about is that sometimes when people get very involved in going to the other person, it's almost like a sense of abandoning themselves. And so we're really coming back home here, really settling back in into this awareness. And now just go ahead and bring your attention back to your breath, back to your feet and your seat. Wiggle your toes, shift around a little bit. Take some nice, deep, energetic, clearing breaths. And just begin to come on back.
I like that. That's very grounding, but it doesn't create those unhealthy borders between people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of a way of exploring what it's like on a really felt sense level of being in a space with another person. And this is in this example because our listeners are out there, we're doing it so that they're just imagining whoever it is. I might also do that with a client and have them focusing on me.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of different ways that you can play with this. And with hypnosis, you can put this in the middle of a trance so that they're pretty deeply relaxed. And that's all helpful too for change work. So Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right. I may have to be inspired by that and
Awesome.
use that now and then.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Now, earlier you had mentioned something that sounded really interesting, somatic attachment therapy. Super curious about this. Can you tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wonder if this would be a good time to actually dive into my own personal history and story, because that's how I first got into this. Okay, so I have my own attachment story, but like most people, it goes back a really long way, all the way back to the household that I grew up in, where we did not have a lot of great communication. Um, and I realize now, looking back, that both parents had insecure attachment styles. We didn't touch. There were no "I love yous" or any of that kind of thing growing up. And so when I went into my 20s, I really didn't know how to be in a relationship. And I was super lucky that, looking back, my first partner had secure attachment, but he sure had a lot to put up with. Because imagine somebody growing up without touch trying to figure out how to do touch for the first time. And so there's just a lot of push-pull dynamics and a lot of me dropping into freeze state, dissociation, and all kinds of chaos while I was working through these attachment patterns that I was completely unaware of. And it wasn't until my 30s that something shifted for me. So I was dating someone. We had amazing chemistry, very, very fast, amazing chemistry, which now I recognize can be a red flag. And things going for a couple of weeks. And all of a sudden, he pulled away. I'd already fallen for him when he told me that when women get close to them, he actually starts to hate them. So it's too late. I'd already fallen for him. We had a dramatic breakup. I got my heart broken. And that's when I learned about attachment and the huge role it plays in relationships. And that just blew my mind, because when I learned about that attachment style, attachment theory, it explained everything, but I couldn't find a whole lot of resources or information on how to change your attachment style. I was reading the book Attached by Levine, and it explained what it was, but it didn't explain what to do about it. And so it took me a little while to discover that that was possible. And when I did, I got certified in what you're asking about, dynamic attachment repatterning, with one of the leading experts in somatic attachment therapy, my mentor, Diane Cole-Heller. And it was amazing. The somatic work is an amazing way to approach attachment. But I didn't stop there. I thought there must be a way to do this faster and more efficiently. And so I got certified in clinical hypnotherapy. And I had my own history already with hypnotherapy from my 20s. I actually had chronic pain and was using it for that. And so I already had it, it had a place in my heart. And hypnotherapy has been shown to make really deep changes at the subconscious level, so that as much as we know something's true, we don't always change, right? Like how many times have you wanted to break a habit only to find yourself doing that thing that you didn't want to do? And so that's why hypnosis is useful for food cravings and exercise, and why Olympic athletes use it and all of that. But the somatic attachment work is what we were just doing in that exercise, is really an example of that, where you're really focusing on felt sense awareness in your body. And like I said, all this stuff starts way back in the womb or in early childhood. And so the body is like remembering this stuff from way back then. And so by working on a body level, where we're feeling into our responses as we're experiencing different relational situations, which of course we can do in hypnotherapy, because in hypnosis, you can experience whatever you want. That's the great thing about hypnosis. And so by doing that, we can create change on a really deep level. And yeah, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that gives us a good bit of thing there. And of course, we have the magic of the internet for certification if anyone's interested, or further review in there, definitely. All right, so looks like we're sneaking up on that hour mark. If anybody out there listening wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So you can visit my website at KayliLarkin.com. It's spelled KayliLarkin.com. And if you go to KayliLarkin.com/quiz, there's an attachment quiz that you can take. and it will tell you your attachment style, and then you will also receive a free 10-step plan to shift to secure attachment.
Okay, very super handy for a lot of people out there. Now, before we end up completely wrapping up, just the one last question. If you could only give one piece of advice to anybody out there who's having some trouble finding that right person, yeah, because this is just a small question, right? What would be the one big bomb that you would drop on somebody to help them set some stuff straight?
To find the perfect person, I would say start with the quiz, start with learning about your attachment style, and go from there, because attachment is so foundational and underlies so many relational difficulties.
Yeah.
And I guess, gosh, it's hard to come up with one thing, but that's where I would start, just because that is a huge piece of relationship work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's generally, I think, with any type of change work, that's generally the best advice, is find out what's going on internally and then move from there.
Right, exactly.
Definitely. Okay, very cool. I will put your website in the show notes as well as the quiz portion there. Thanks for that, by the way. It's always nice to get free stuff
Yeah,
from
isn't
experts. Once again, Kayli, thanks for doing this interview. It's always fun to reach out and talk to other people in the field and learn some really cool stuff. And
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
I wish you the absolute best. And I'm going to go ahead and let you go. All right. Thanks. Bye. And that was the amazing Kayli Larkin, dropping some knowledge on us about attachment styles and romance. And I may be slithering on into old age when I say this type of thing, but in today's world where so much of our communication is done digitally over Snapchat or Tinder or, well, the ever omnipresent giant that is Facebook or any other social media format, we tend to have this strange habit of creating a false self that is intended to fool other people into thinking you're much more interesting and much more amazing than you really are. And in a way, we tend to trap ourselves in that too. And of course, when that type of behavior wanders into a romantic relationship, things can get very confusing and unhealthy very quickly. And that's why I'm really glad that there are people like Kayli who operate in the fields that they do, and they do so well. So I definitely recommend checking out her website at KayliLarkin.com. That's KayliLarkin.com. And of course, she was kind enough, like she mentioned, to offer us all a quiz so we can take a look at our attachment styles. And that's KayliLarkin.com/quiz. Be sure to pop on in, check it out, and tell her I sent you. I think that's all we're going to have for today. I'd like to thank you guys for coming back and, well, just hanging out and giving us an hour of your time so we could sit there and have this great conversation and share it with some other people out there. We've got some exciting stuff coming up in the month of October I look forward to sharing with you. Be sure to come on by, check it out. And if you'd like to reach out to us at any point in time, of course, we're at driftingdeeperpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to drop us a line, tell us you love us, tell us you hate us, tell us whatever you want. But whatever you do, I want you to go out and have a great day. Remember to love each other and love yourselves. Bye.